gonna wait to see if any other students show up, and if not, we'll start at about 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, let's get things started. See if other people may show up as we go along. This is going to be a pretty straightforward session. This one is going to be GRE focused. This one is about vocabulary. Shakila, you may be new to some of these sessions. Are you taking the GRE or the GMAT? And feel free to use the chat window if you like. All right, so this is GRE specific. So here's the thing about, hi Anna, welcome to the classroom. All right, so here's the thing about the GRE vocabulary. Vocabulary has been a kind of a centerpiece of a lot of the standardized tests, everything from the SAT, all the way up through the GRE for decades. It's gone through a bunch of different changes. So it's not quite as heavy, as it used to be. The GRE used to have things like analogies and antonyms. Now it's really these, these kind of sentence and context types of questions. All right, we're going to get to what those look like in a bit. But what I want to focus on is kind of how to study for vocabulary. Should you be studying for vocabulary, and kind of like how to not take it for granted. All right. So here's the thing about the GRE. The GRE has, those of you taking it, you probably know at this point what it looks like because you've probably been, been practicing. All right. So the GRE has in the verbal section 3 categories, basically 3 categories, depending on how you want to break it up. You have your reading comprehension, which goes without saying. These are either short or long passages. Then you've got 2 different types of fill in the blank questions. All right, so the first fill in the blank is what they call text completion. All right, the text completion this is the one where you've got 1, 2, or 3 blanks. All right, so they're going to give you they'll give you however many choices, and then you want to find the ones that fit. And then you've got what's called your sentence equivalence, and that is where they're testing you on synonyms. All right, for the sentence equivalence, there's always going to be, they're going to look a little bit different. There are going to be 6 different choices for those. These are all fill in the blanks. They all are vocabulary based. So basically you end up with a test that's probably 50 or 60% vocab. And here's the thing, because people tend to take things for granted. It's like, well, my vocabulary is fine. I'm already in, I'm about to apply to grad school. I mean, I can't really learn anymore. But the thing is, because vocabulary is such a central part of the test, you do want to make it kind of a consistent background regimen, of your studying. All right. So I would say, because it's easy to do, it doesn't really take much thought. I would recommend studying vocabulary consistently, as in every day. All right. Now, however much time you devote to that, that's up to you. Whether you do like 20 minutes, an hour, whatever. But keep it going. All right. And keep it as a background. Whether you're doing quantitative, whether you're doing whatever you're doing with your actual studying, with your practice, keep the vocab going. Because what you want to do, aside from the fact that you're going to you're going to build up a vocabulary for life anyway. I mean, these words are useful to use. I mean, I studied this way for my SAT and the GRE, and it actually made a huge difference. All right, so keep that going. And the thing that's good about it is that you are not just going to be learning the few words that you pick up, because every word that you pick up is going to be a gateway to a bunch of other similar words, right? So if you learn one, you might recognize a word root that you weren't familiar with, then you might learn another 10, all right? It's difficult to say exactly kind of how many, how much something like this is going to increase your score. It depends on when you start doing it. It depends on on obviously which words come up, but there's always a whole bunch of targeted words that, that show up fairly often. So the more you do this, especially if you have more than, say, more than a month or so before the test, there's a very good chance that a few things are going to come up and you might be able to boost your score a couple of points. All right. So how are you going to do this? There are a million ways. It depends on who you are and kind of what your learning style is. There's a ton of ways of doing this. Whether you use flashcards, whether you use an app, what I did, I just went and typed out, or not typed out, I just printed out word lists. Whatever you do, you want to be methodical. All right, because the thing is, a lot of people just say, oh well, cool, I've got 10 minutes free. Why don't I just go and check out a few words? And don't have any kind of method to it. If you do it that way, sure, it's fine. You'll get kind of internalize some words in the background, but it won't be the most effective way of doing it. What you want to do is be as methodical as you can. Now, there's a million ways of being methodical about it. What I did, for example, way back when I was taking my SAT, I had months just to review for this thing. So I had I had 3,000 words. Obviously, I didn't do all of them. And it was broken up into I think 60 lists of 50 words each, and I could do each list, one list a day. So I did it that way. Usually what you're going to be doing is anywhere from probably a targeted list of maybe 300 to 1,000 words. All right, depending on time. If you're taking the test in a couple of weeks or a month, anywhere from 300 to 500 words is generally fine. All right, and you want to get a good one. So Barron's. Barrett's good word lists, the Economist magazine, Kaplan. There's a bunch of them, and I can actually put some. Hold on one second. I'll actually put a couple of these in the chat window so that you have them on hand. Here's one. If you guys want to copy that, there's another one I had somewhere. 1 second. This here is a Barron's app, which is highly rated. I haven't used it myself, but if you if you want to use your smartphone or whatever to do this, there's another one. Okay, so there's a bunch of these. But generally, what I would recommend doing is say, okay, for each day, say you're going to allow yourself something like sorry, it's a background fan noise here, but say you're going to allow 20 minutes a day. All right. So say, well, okay, I'm going to go and take a word list of maybe 50 words or something like that. All right. And then at the end of some set time period, a week or something like that, then you're going to come back and review the words that, that you missed. All right. And by doing that, you're going to build up a whole, you'll learn, say, 100-200 more words, which will definitely be enough to bump your score up a little bit. All right. That's kind of the first general stuff. Now let's talk about more targeted approaches. Word roots. If any of you have a second language, particularly one of the Latin-based languages, that is going to help you significantly. Yeah. 1 second. So we're a little bit wild with the there we go. Okay. Talking about the Latin languages. Can be helpful. Why? Well, you've got prefixes, you've got suffixes, and you've got word roots. And you'll find that if you have even some, you don't have to be fluent, but even if you have some background, even high school level in French, Spanish, Italian, something like that, those can definitely be helpful. So let's take a look at some examples of how that might work. All right. let's take a word like, oh, I don't know. Does anyone know what the word root BEL means? Either probably best to put it in the chat if you do know it. Anyone know what BEL means? It's a Latin word root. Okay, I'm going to give some examples of where you might find it. All right, bellicose, belligerent, antebellum, rebel, so post much. This is technically a post spelling. Rebel, stuff like that. All right. Anyone know what these words might mean, or what the BEL might mean? Okay, well, I'll tell you. Okay, belligerent, aggressive. That works. Okay. Anyone know any of these other ones? I'm sure you know rebel. Okay, antebellum in American context, it's pre-Civil War, but it really means more generally it just means before any war. So when you talk about an antebellum period, it just means before the war, even though usually here it's used to mean Civil War. I should really I should be lowercase, to be honest. Okay, bellicose. Bellicose means warlike. All right, and rebel is obviously it could be going against authority, right? One who goes against authority. If you're talking about a rebel, right, or to rebel, it's go against authority, or to go against an established government, whatever else, right? If you rebel against the regime. All right. Okay. What do these all have in common? Some kind of aggressiveness, some kind of war. All right. So the root there is aggression/war. So if you see a word that has BEL in it, particularly if it's a long word that looks like it might have kind of something kind of Greek or Latin derived characteristics, that can help you to a lot of different different words. Another example is, anyone know what circumspect means? Close. Not it's more about caution. Let's see where this comes from. Okay, circumspect. All right. Any idea what some of the word roots might be in here? And let's throw in some other related words. How about circumlocution, circumnavigation, or circumnavigate, circle, why not? Circlet. All right. Circumscribe. Okay. Obviously, with a word like circumspect, this is like you've got the CIRC, which means circle, right? It's round. Okay, so it's kind of the root is going to have something to do with round. Again, it's a Latin one. All right. So here, circumnavigate. Think about Magellan, for example, or somebody who's circumnavigating the globe, right? To go around whatever. It doesn't have to be the whatever you're going around. To navigate around, right? Circlet is basically a piece of jewelry, whatever accessory that you could wear that looks like a circle, right? Circumscribe, scribe has to do with writing, right? To basically kind of write around something, to to circle something, right? If you have in geometry, I know this is a verbal section, but we'll bring in some geometry here. If you have, exactly, if you've got a circle that is circumscribed around a triangle like this, right? There you go. So it means that it's written around something else, okay? Circumlocution, LOQ has, or LOC or LOQ has to do with speech or voice. So that means like speaking around something, not getting to the point. So circumspect, has to do with vision, all right? You know, something that you might see. So the idea is you're coming into a room, you're looking around carefully. So that's where it comes to mean cautious, all right? So I would recommend studying some of these word roots. Let's take a look. Let's see. Let's see if this is a good list here. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, so I'm going to copy the list in here, and then we're going to talk about this a little bit. Okay, so taking a look at some of these, some of the there's better lists out there. This one's decent because it's it's very concise, but it doesn't really give definitions here. But you can see, like for example, A and BI means both, right? Yes. Yep. Oh, sorry. I didn't see the difference between roots and prefix. If you're talking about a prefix, is basically that part of the word that occurs at the beginning of the that part at the beginning of the word. Suffix would be at the end of the word, and a root would be something in the middle of the word that the word is based on. All right. So in this case here, let's see. Take an example like antebellum. The BEL is really the word root. All right. Ante is the prefix. So ante actually means coming before. All right. The BEL, bellum, is basically the Latin word for the Latin word for war, or for conflict or aggression. I can't remember exactly what. So yeah, it just really kind of depends on where it shows up. But the idea is where you have like a long word like this, you want to try to see if you can kind of spot any of these things. Keep in mind, this is not a it's not a catch-all. I mean, you could have a word like bell, which has absolutely nothing to do with with these at all. There's another example where words might look like they have similarities but don't. Let me give you an example of two difficult words that might show up. Sepulcher and pulchritude. Anyone know what either of these two words mean? And they certainly look similar, but there's actually no direct relationship, at least that yeah, I mean, at least that that anyone's really aware of. All right, sepulcher is a tomb. Thinking the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, for example. Pulchritude is beauty. No relationship between the two. So you want to be on the lookout, because every now and then there's going to be something that might look like there's a relationship with and it turns out that there isn't. But this is a tool that can help you. All right. Let's take a look at just a couple of these words and contexts to I'm going to stop sharing the screen for 1 second while I grab these examples. So let me see here. I'm going to find a decent example. Here we go. I'll reshare the screen. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at Okay, in GRE context, here is something that you might come across. And actually, hold on 1 second. Just want to, I'll put this back up in a second. Okay. Okay, what I wanted to do was give you an example of something with some, kind of a mix of words here. Some of them you will know. Obviously, you'll know what poetic means. You probably know what insightful means. All right. Okay, but there's also some tougher words in here as well. So what I would recommend for questions like this, I generally recommend reading the sentence first. One thing that you might do is come up with a word that that fits the blank. But then take a look at the vocabulary and see which words you know. All right, like my guess is you're all going to know what poetic means. You'll probably know what insightful means. You probably know what perceptive means. Iconoclastic's a bit harder. Prosaic you may or may not know. Heuristic's a bit harder. All right. So you're going to get some that are a mix, and you'll often find that in the words with a single blank, in the questions with a single blank, the words can be a little bit harder because there's only one blank to figure out. All right. Okay. So from a vocabulary perspective, well, then you're going to read the questions. Like, okay, like other metaphors, it's the book of nature has two facets. It is something, but if taken literally, it may mislead. Okay. Now, because here we're focusing on vocabulary, we're not focusing on too much on kind of the strategy behind these sentence completions. But you do want to be on the lookout for words like but. It's like so it's something potentially good, but if taken literally, it may mislead. All right. So you're looking for synonyms because this is a synonym type of question. But the thing is, you've also got a couple of difficult words in here. So one thing about vocabulary that I want to mention is do not be, exactly. Don't be intimidated by words that are difficult. If you find that if you find that there's a word that you don't know, but you have no real reason to rule it out, if it's it's a hard vocabulary word, but you don't know what it means, don't rule it out unless you have a reason to. Because a lot of times we'll find that somebody will have a choice between one word that's easy and doesn't quite feel right, and a word that's more difficult, and they just rule out the difficult one because they don't know it. But if if the easy one doesn't feel right, then it's probably wrong, right? Your gut instinct is usually, not usually, but very often right. Okay, so let's take a look at these words here. Anyone know what, okay, so we had, Deepak was saying that, prosaic is basically common. Anyone know what that comes from? Getting to the word root stuff. And it doesn't mean common as in commonly occurring. It means kind of common like, ordinary, right? Of or related to, not interesting, of or related to prose, right? Now, this does not mean that prose in writing is not interesting. It means that, it's kind of, when you talk about prose versus poetry, that has a somewhat different meaning when you're talking about writing, right? Prose is like narrative fiction, something that's not poetic. But in this context here, we're actually talking about something that is ordinary, potentially interesting, just kind of run of the mill. All right. Whereas poetic, it could pertain directly to poetry, or it could be used more metaphorically, right? Kind of poetic justice or something like that. All right. What about let's see, iconoclastic? Anyone know what that means? or what some of the word roots might be? Now, the reason that you're saying famous is probably because of the word of the that root icon, right? The thing is, icon comes from something like, icon comes from like, from like a religious image, right? Like a religious icon. Yeah. What this basically means, an iconoclast is, it's sort of functions as basically a root and a prefix in this case. There's basically someone going against kind of established precepts, whether it's established religion, whether it's kind of an established way of thinking. It's kind of one who goes against. All right, and it comes from iconography. If you think about sort of religious iconography, that's where it comes from. But it doesn't have to be about religion now. So it's like these words obviously change in meaning as you go along. So iconoclast is somebody, one who goes against authority, or one who questions authority. Not like a rebel necessarily, but one who questions established authority. Whether it's religion or conventional wisdom, whatever. All right. Okay, then we've got a heuristic, which is just a different, one of the more difficult vocabulary words. And HEUR is a root, but it's not a common one. I'm not even sure what that would mean. So I can look that one up right now. But the word itself basically means, basically something, enabling somebody to do something for oneself. All right. But so there's a couple here that you can use the word prefixes, word roots. Iconoclastic is one, prosaic is another one. All right. Now, getting to the actual sentence, it's like, well, okay, we've got something potentially positive, but if taken literally, it may mislead. What they're actually looking for here are two synonyms. The things that are most closely synonymous, there's really only two in here. That would be perceptive and insightful. All right, so it's like, yes, the book of nature is, it has a lot to offer, but you don't want to take it too literally. Because the other words in here, they're difficult, but they're not, there's no synonyms in there. You're always looking for two synonyms with these kinds of questions. All right. Okay, I'm going to take a look at, let's see, one more of the other question type. 1 second. Science advances blank as blank changed abruptly, and we're forced to stop and reorient ourselves to view old information in new ways. Are there any words in here that anybody does not know? And if there are any, they would probably be, let's see, inexorably is one of them that some people might not be sure of. Paradigm is one that some people might not be sure of. Axiom is another one. Anyone know what these words mean? Okay. Inexorably basically means it can't be, exhausted, can't be worn out. Relentlessly. An axiom is basically kind of it's basically a truth, a self-evident truth. You may see it in geometry. Yeah, a paradigm is a bit more of it's like a worldview. If you think of like a scientific paradigm, it's like, the current paradigm is that, I don't know, the universe began in a big bang or something like that, or will end in a big crunch, right? So kind of a way of looking at things. All right. Okay. So then, all right. So now, yeah, I got probably 3 or 4 words that you know, maybe a couple that you might not be completely sure of. Okay. So let's fill in the blanks here, and I think we'll stop with this one here, and then after we're done with this one, then I'll stick around for 15, 20 minutes if there's any questions. All right. Any thoughts on the answers to this one? The science advances in some way as paradigms change abruptly. Okay, as worldviews change abruptly, and we're forced to kind of reevaluate things. Paradigms used to work pretty well in there. And now for the first blank, you're going to want something that is captured by this whole idea of stopping and starting, abrupt changes, back and forth. There you go, jerkily. C and D. All right. So yeah, I mean, all right. I know that there's some of you who may not be taking the GRE, in which case you don't need to worry about this. 1 second. But yeah, so for the GRE, no matter when you're taking it, I would start doing this now. Start doing it today. I mean, again, whether you use flashcards, whether you use word lists, an app, or something else, take it. Kind of start doing it now. Make it a fundamental part of the background review. It will, there's a very good chance you'll be able to pick up a few points just from doing it, and it'll also kind of help you with kind of figuring out how to use the words in context and do well in the verbal section. All right, thank you everybody, and have a good week. And again, I'll be around here for for about 15 minutes or so if anyone's got any questions. Sure thing. Yep. Yeah, Anna. Go ahead. Okay. Do you have a test date yet? Okay, so you've got some time. What I would say is probably at the beginning, or yeah, I mean, I would say honestly, most of what you're going to be doing, is gonna be the other stuff, actual kind of practice questions, right? It's like that's where the meat of the um, of the study is going to be. You want to make this a backdrop. So how are you? Have you taken any practice tests? And if so, how are you doing on the verbal section? because in general, what I'd recommend, let's see, yeah, what I generally recommend is like, I mean, you don't want like vocabulary to take over everything that you're doing, but you want it to be a good backdrop. So I would say, if you're doing, say, like maybe 20 to 30 minutes a day of vocabulary, if you can, if you can only do like, 10 or 15, that's fine. It's like in general, try to be consistent, try to do it, try to do vocabulary as part of everything else that you're doing. And yeah, I think if you could do like, up to say 20, 30 minutes a day, it's probably a good amount. You might break it up into like, into lists. If you could do say, okay, I'm going to do maybe say 20 or 30 words a day, right? And then like what I did, I took a word list. I did it like this, I had a word list, and then I basically went down the list and I would cross off all the words that I knew, and I would circle all the words that I did not know. All right. And then at the end of a week, I would go back over all the circled words just to do like, one review of all of those. Then I'd move on to a new list, and then periodically go back, and review the new words. But yeah, this should probably be about like maybe, like 10 or 15% of everything that you're doing. But it's good to be consistent and methodical. And because if you've got, say, if you've got a month left, I would say, do like maybe a 300 word list, so you're not overwhelmed with it. 300 to 500 either way. You might look for things that are, you'll often find things like that, what they'll call things like a high frequency. No, not a day. The list overall. Yeah, no, yeah, 300 or 500. Yeah, that would drive you nuts. You don't want to do that. Keep it sane. So I would say in terms of numbers of words per day, anywhere between like, I don't know, maybe, 20 or 30 would be fine. All right, that help? Good luck. Thanks for dropping by. Have a good week. So I see there's a couple of folks still here. Any questions from you guys? Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions, so I am going to log out of the meeting. All right, thanks everybody for dropping by, and I will see folks in a couple of weeks.